important topic today that we are going to discuss. In today's world, specifically, and when the statistics are so startling in terms of harassment of women in the workplace. I know when I say harassment, I'm putting it under a blanket, but it's a very important topic. And as we grow, as we move towards more global standards, it is very important that organizations today have the intent as well as the instruments to move towards this direction. Many times, what has happened is we have worked with so many startups who are growing like anything. They have the intent to work towards the empowerment. They want to work towards the making it more inclusive and safe, but they don't know how to do it. That's the reason we thought of starting this webinar today. And Maitri has very kindly spared some time. So she is something about her is she is one of our principals in legal practice, and she has a gold mine of experience in this. She is a National Law College grad, has previous experiences with AZB and Trilegal, and there could be honestly nobody better who could throw some light onto it. Her practice area is dispute resolution, and she works evidently and very extensively in corporate governance, in software companies, SaaS companies, e-commerce companies. So she has seen a lot of things upfront and from the ground up. So this is a very important topic, and I believe that this will help. At the end of the webinar, you'll be able to take away a lot of things in terms of how you can implement things in your organization. We all know the theory more of it. She will help us understand and getting into the fine print and how we can develop an actionable strategy towards it. The first step towards it is understanding this. And that's the motive of this webinar. A lot of people have joined in. So the format that we will follow is, I'll ask Maitri to take forward with her presentation, and she will go through the presentation that she has for us. At the end of it, you are welcome to share your questions at the question and answer box that you will see on your screen. And we will take up a few questions for Maitri to answer them. Maitri, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dipanjali. So like she said, we're here to discuss something that's, quite important, but also sometimes I see that it's quite neglected. Even established companies, new companies seem to forget this as an important part of their compliance, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. So this topic is important again, not just from a pure compliance perspective, but also from the perspective of how you want your organization to be. How do you want your ethos and the culture of your organization to be, and how inclusivity and diversity are very important factors for that. So, while there are old school companies, like I said, that don't have any such policies in place, they don't give much importance to this. They're from the thought of let's just not talk to women at all. It's going to cause problems. So we're talking about, how to change that, how to improve that, and how to be compliant with what the law says is mandatory for you to do. As society is getting more progressive, employees are also expecting their workplace to be progressive and sensitized to the needs of everyone. While there are some laws that make this compulsory, like maternity benefit, like POSH that we're going to talk about today, and the most controversial period leave debate that's been happening the world over. So today we'll stick to the act called Prevention of Sexual Harassment of Women at the Workplace, and the rules and how implementation can happen. And we'll also talk quite a bit about what exactly sexual harassment is, and what organizations and what individuals can do to make the workplace a better place for women. So you can see on the screen, there are some quite troubling statistics. 1 in 15 employees has experienced sexual violence and harassment at the workplace. UN Convention and UN Labor Agency says that recurrent episodes of sexual harassment are at higher for women at work. So, while these are troubling statistics, please also keep in mind that, not all harassment gets reported. So, this, as troubling as this is still not presenting the complete picture. I also want to very quickly dive into, very briefly about the history of the Act. So India had ratified the UN Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women way back in 1993. However, until the Act till 2013, there was no legislation in place. There was the case Vishaka versus State of Rajasthan, which was in the backdrop of a horrific rape case in which the Supreme Court set out some guidelines for organizations to follow and how they should deal with sexual harassment and complaints and all of that. These Vishaka guidelines were followed for a long time. And even though the Supreme Court in that case had said that the legislature should come out with an act, it took till 2013 for an act to finally be promulgated by the government. Now quickly jumping into the POSH Act, who has to comply? So the Act has a very broad definition of what a workplace is. So everything about it, it's prevention of harassment at the workplace. So what is a workplace? Reading it out, any private sector organization or a private venture undertaking, enterprise, institution, establishment, society, trust, non-governmental organization, unit, or service provider carrying on commercial, professional, vocational, educational, entertainment, industrial, health services, or financial activities, including production, supply, sale, distribution, or service. If this wasn't exhaustive enough, it also includes any place visited by the employee arising out of or during the course of employment, including transportation by the employer for undertaking such a journey. While there's the definition of workplace, something called an unorganized sector has also been defined, which is basically an organization that has less than 10 employees. So now the approach that's been taken and what's being followed is that any establishment with 10 or more employees have to have a POSH policy in place. I'm sure all of you are wondering, what if all the 10 employees are men? Should we still have a POSH policy? I don't think the Act makes any distinction between, the gender of your employees. It says 10 or more. You have to have a POSH policy in place. You have to have an internal complaints committee. We're just going to get to that in the next stage. And you have to comply with the obligations in the Act. So, important question, what constitutes sexual harassment? What the Act says is implied or explicit promise of preferential treatment in employment, implied or explicit threat of detrimental treatment in employment, implied or explicit threat about present or future employment status, interference with work, creating intimidating, offensive, or hostile work environment, humiliating treatment likely to affect health or safety. The definition is wide, and like the definition of workplace was already wide, it would include, suppose your organization has organized a party where an incident happens. The question would be, it didn't happen in the office, it happened at a hotel somewhere. Would that constitute sexual harassment? Absolutely, yes. What about if an employee has a party and other employees are there? I would say that organizations ought to treat that also as a sexual harassment at the workplace. And of course, now as companies go more and more towards working from home and virtual interactions with colleagues, you would think that maybe sexual harassment has been reduced, but I have also personally dealt with a lot of companies who've had these incidents that happen. So virtual harassment, virtual interactions also come under workplace and would constitute sexual harassment. So while we look at the definition of sexual harassment in the POSH Act, we should also look at the Indian Penal Code and the Information Technology Act, which also have which are also penal statutes that punish sexual harassment and harassment against women, basically crimes against women. So 354A defines sexual harassment, physical contact, unwelcome advance, explicit sexual act, demands or requests for sexual favors, showing pornography against the will, making sexually colored. Section 354, outraging the modesty of a woman, insulting the modesty of a woman. Section 375 is rape. Information Technology Act is an act that governs, in a simplistic sense, communication online, I would say, communication over your computer. So these also, in this act also, there are several offenses against women that are punishable that I have listed in the presentation that you can see. So what is one of the first few steps as an organization that you have to do to be in compliance with POSH is to set up your internal complaints committee. That's called the ICC. So the importance of ICC is it's responsible for addressing any grievances related to the sexual harassments at workplace. The committee has to be formed with the proper people. I'll get to that in the next slide. And they should also be given some sort of training to understand what their roles, responsibilities, and duties are. And the charter document, the document from which the ICC gets its power, should be the broader POSH policy that will contain, all the steps of what an organization should do, what is sexual harassment, what is not tolerated, who gets punished, where do you file your complaint, how long does it take for a complaint to get heard, and all those things. Members of the ICC. So they can be broadly categorized into three kinds of members. There's a one presiding member who's a woman employed at a senior level. Secondly, internal members. These are other two employees. Preferably, I know it might be hard for an organization to get that. So it's not mandatory that they are committed to cause of women or have legal knowledge. Then the important one is an external member. An external member is a member from maybe an NGO or association committed to the cause of women, familiar with the issue of sexual harassment. And the entire composition of the committee, at least one half should be women. The posts are held for 3 years. So how you go about this is you create a POSH policy, you form an internal complaints committee, you get all these members in place, and you execute appointment letters for them. You make an order for constitution of the committee, and you can either email this to your employees, or if you have a notice board or some sort of physical place where such notifications are displayed, you can keep a copy there. So roles and responsibilities of the ICC: they'll be responsible for addressing any grievances related to sexual harassment at the workplace. They will prepare an annual report that will contain, that's basically a report of all the pending and resolved complaints. Finalize the POSH policy, set up training sessions and create awareness, ensure that they're unbiased. And also, this is just as an aside, by an amendment of the Companies Act, the annual report of the company now has to declare that they have complied with the provisions of the POSH and have constituted an ICC. So how does an inquiry into a complaint go? So this is quite procedural, so I don't want to delve into this too much. But basically, as an example, I can just tell you what the rules say, and this is something that you can then implement in your POSH policy as well. Basically, it says complaint, aggrieved woman will make the complaint. When she's not able to, someone who representing her can make the complaint. On the receipt of the complaint, the complaints committee shall send one copy to the respondent within a period of 7 working days. Respondent is the accused in this case. Then the respondent will file the reply, what happens, how many days, and all that. According to the POSH Act, a complaint has to be filed within 3 months of the incident. However, this 3-month period can be waived, can be extended by the ICC. Before initiating the inquiry, the ICC also has the powers to ask the aggrieved person if if there is any settlement, if it can just end with the respondent apologizing. Of course, the Act very clearly says that there's no monetary settlement that can happen through this. If this step doesn't happen, then an inquiry begins. In the inquiry, both the sides are allowed to represent and present their case to the ICC. Legal representation is not permitted, by which I mean they can't engage a lawyer and the lawyer can't appear on behalf of them. The inquiry has to be completed within a period of 90 days. And then the ICC comes out with its report. It could be finding of guilt, or it could be it could be a report that says that there was no merit in the case. One other very, very important thing is that throughout the inquiry, basically from the minute a complaint is received, and I would urge that even if it's not a formal complaint, even if HR in your company gets an email from an employee saying that look, this incident has happened, from that moment I would say the duty of confidentiality would begin, where you won't reveal to everyone the name of the complainant, or that such an incident has happened. And you're more than well aware what happens at a workplace. People will start to gossip, there will be some sort of everybody will have an opinion about it. And also there's a defamation aspect involved as well. And this is how you protect victims. If already there's such a big hurdle that one has to cross to make a complaint about sexual harassment, so this is there to give them that sort of added protection under the Act. So you have to ensure confidentiality of the names of the parties, of the witnesses, of the complaint, address, and everything else. There's also a provision of interim measures where basically the ICC has the power to say, okay, let me transfer this employee to another department for now, or let me grant leave for a period of 3 months. So, those are also possible reliefs that can be given by the ICC to the aggrieved person. Then we already talked about the inquiry report. The inquiry report, basically, there are various actions that can be taken, like cutting the salary or, asking for an apology letter. Again, the Act, the rules have a good number of things that can happen where it says, yeah, they shall have the right to terminate, shall have the right to ask for apology, and ask them to take mandatory sensitization training, and so on and so forth. The inquiry report that's submitted by the ICC and the recommendations have to mandatorily be accepted by the organization. So this is what is the ICC and the compliance and all of that. There's also, duties of the employers, which, even though not explicitly stated in the Act, which are equally important. Provide a safe working environment at the workplace, including all safety, display at a conspicuous place the penal consequences of sexual harassment, and the order constituting the internal complaints committee, organize workshops, awareness programs at regular intervals for sensitizing employees, providing necessary facilities, ensuring that, if your employee is the accused in a case, ensuring that he comes and presents his case before the ICC, that he just, doesn't respond or react. And that's the duty of the employer, to ensure that the inquiry takes place before the ICC, and monitor timely submission of reports by the ICC. So now, I just put out a checklist. So draft your POSH policy, constitute your ICC in consonance with the Act and the rules, create employee awareness and assistance, regular training for ICC employees, and your annual reports. So penalty for non-compliance is a fine extending to ₹50,000. Well, of course, that may not seem like a lot for most companies, but I would say that the reputational damage from having such a penalty imposed would also be a deterrent. Recently, Sri Lankan Airlines was fined by the Delhi High Court for not complying with POSH policy. This is based on a complaint by an ex-employee who said, they didn't have a POSH policy. I didn't have anywhere to go when I had to make a complaint. So the Delhi High Court did impose that fine. And for any of you who may have questions regarding, what if she's lying, and what if she's just making the case to ensure I don't get a promotion, there is punishment for malicious complaints and false evidence given, and the ICC can recommend action against the complainant for in such cases. How courts are dealing with POSH. So usually when the cases go to court are when, say, the woman finds that there's some bias in the constitution of the ICC. For instance, if the ICC has the subordinate of the person against whom the complaint is being made, or bias can be reflected in many ways. I would say that an ICC asking questions like, why didn't you come and complain before? Why are you doing it now? Or you be scared. You're a complainant. You don't know what happens. All of these are definite reflection of biases, and it's very important, not only, of course, for the ICC to not be unbiased, but for us to also inculcate that, that unbiased approach when it comes to dealing with things like this. So, courts are, of course, purposively interpreting the sections of the Act, which is that they're recognizing what the Act means to do. So recently, the Calcutta High Court passed a judgment saying that a sexual harassment complaint, even though the term woman is very clearly written in the name of the Act itself, the Calcutta High Court said that a complaint can be filed between people of the same gender as well. So you can see, I've just highlighted some things that the courts have said that give you an idea about how the courts approach cases under POSH. Sexual harassment in the workplace is an affront to the fundamental rights of a woman to equality and live with dignity. Sexual harassment, as contemplated in the 2013 Act, has to pertain to the dignity of a person, which relates to his or her gender and sexuality, which does not mean that any person of the same gender cannot hurt the modesty or dignity as envisaged by the Act. A narrow, pedantic approach cannot be taken in defining the term workplace by confining the meaning to commonly understood expression office. Institutions can't escape liability for dragging on sensitive sexual harassment complaints. Court said this in a case where The aggrieved woman filed a case saying that the ICC has been sitting on my case. It's been more than 2 years, and they've not made any recommendations. They keep asking me for re-examination. They keep changing the constitution of the ICC. So the court imposed a fine on the company and said, ask them to pay compensation to the aggrieved person and ask them to finish the inquiry in a time-bound manner. Another important thing, even an attempt to molest or outrageous, sorry, what happened? Yeah. Even an attempt to molest or outrageous behavior of employee amounts to sexual harassment, and actual touch or assault is not necessary. So this brings me, and I just really wanted to, read out a list of some actions at workplace that constitute overt harassment: making sexually suggestive remarks or innuendos, serious or repeated offensive remarks, offensive comments or jokes, inappropriate questions, displaying sexist or offensive pictures, intimidation, threats around sexual favors, unwelcome social invitations. If you've already refused that you don't want to go to lunch with a person, them asking you again and again, persistently asking someone out, stalking, abuse of authority or power, controlling a person's reputation by rumor mongering about their private life, all these constitute sexual harassment, and courts have recognized it as well. Inclusive workplace. I mean, this is again coming to a very important, part of the presentation, which is that you want a diverse workplace, you want an inclusive workplace. The way society is going right now is, there's gender inclusiveness in all aspects. The government has passed an act called the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act, which makes it a punishable offense to discriminate against transgenders on the basis of their gender. So, I mean, how you could do this at your workplace would be to use inclusive terms. You be gender neutral, not discriminate on the basis of gender. And of course, this is something that that companies, especially here, will really need to work hard on and change that old mindset. What organizations can do: instill faith in the minds of employees that they can report matters of sexual harassment at workplace without any fear, and that no concern will go unaddressed. Adopt a gender neutral POSH policy. And I would say, I mean, there are two types of POSH policies that you could implement and adopt as an organization. One is just the basic, whatever's in the act, you just spit it out and you just make a POSH policy and that's it. But I would say that this has to be done mindfully, and you need to read it, look at it, include more things that are not in the act, make it gender neutral, make it inclusive, and fill in all those little gaps that the act doesn't have. Thirdly, sensitize the employees, provide systems and assistance to victims, give them access to counseling, give them access to therapy, assistance to the employees to make criminal complaints to the police. This is also very important. If the aggrieved woman wants to go to the police and make a complaint, then that's the duty of the employer to assist her in doing so. Then, along with the POSH policy, also have a comprehensive code of conduct for employees, because there are a lot of other behaviors that may not be sexual harassment, but they would still amount to harassment, discriminatory behavior, bullying, and abuse, and all those. And as an organization, you should really stand for not tolerating any such behavior. So, along with the POSH policy, also have a comprehensive code of conduct for your employees. What you can do, just to what you can do, I mean, apart from the organization, rely on courtesy rather than contact. You can say well done as opposed to a pat on the back. Use the same gender standards. For instance, if you're talking, for instance, ask yourself, would I compliment as a man? Would I compliment a man on his head, or as a woman, would I compliment another woman on her muscles? You wouldn't. So just have that awareness in your head. Try the candid camera test. I found this quite interesting. So would you feel comfortable having a videotape of the behavior shown to your spouse or your co-workers? If not, then that's something you should probably not be doing. Think of how it would look in print. This is similar to the candid camera test. Imagine the joke that you're, happily telling your coworker. What if it came printed in the newspaper? Would it be offensive? Or would it not? So that's a determination that you will have to make. Avoid invading people's personal space, speak up, and take responsibility for your behavior. So I would like to conclude by saying, I mean, legal compliance and all of that, can always happen, though that's not happening right now. And just to sound you off, no, it's just something that slips under the radar for most companies. It's not a priority. But I mean, A, from a fine perspective, and B, also, if you're seeking some investment, your investor, your due diligence is definitely going to ask you, do you have a POSH policy in place? Because these things are considered very important in other jurisdictions. So, it's not just it's important, and it's something that you should do. And I would like to add that it's not just the mere compliance, but you have to work towards creating an ideal workplace where everyone feels safe, irrespective of their gender and sexuality.